Good afternoon. My name is John Nash. I'm an associate professor in the College of Education, and I also direct the Laboratory on Design Thinking in Education. I'm honored and privileged to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. This afternoon you'll be hearing from Ron Hustedde, who's an extension professor in community and leadership development. And as you see, he'll be talking about topics related to conflict. I had a moment to talk with Ron before we walked in, and I learned something interesting about him. One of the things that he does is conflict resolution and mediation on challenging and tricky topics that divide people, and he does that in rooms of 100 people or more. And the reason he does this is because he finds joy in doing it. He does. He thinks it's fun. So I think it's great that we have someone that has some passion in their work, and I think the framing of issues that you're about to hear that Ron presents are going to be very interesting to you. So without further ado, Ron Hustedde.
So let's see, and to use this. So first question is, when you hear the word conflict, what comes to mind? Any words or images?
Middle East.
Uncomfortable? What others?
Middle East.
Middle East. What else?
Negative.
Negative. What else?
Misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding.
Opportunity.
Opportunity. What else?
Confusion. Confusion.
Confusion. Okay.
Issues.
Issues. Well, you've really summarized the literature in a lot on conflict. It is both a positive and a negative. It just depends how we work it. So essentially, what we do know is that it's predictable, it's everywhere, it's inside of us. I thought, you know, we value health, we value pleasure. Nothing wrong with that. But should I have had that second piece of dessert? My health consciousness would say, no, you shouldn't have even had it first. So we have these internal struggles, and it's everywhere. It's predictable. Major thing is to channel it for useful purposes. So I'm going to skip over, and essentially, successful communities and organizations anticipate conflict. Of course we're going to have it. I'm going to move quickly because there are two major points you need to walk away with that I think will be helpful for your life at home, internally, and in a public setting and work. There are two things. At the end, I'm going to see if you've figured out what those two things are. So, why accent the positive aspects of conflict? Why not just act it out? You're ignorant, you're stupid, I hate you, whatever. That's the temptation. But we have the shadow of the future. And the idea is that we may be in relationships. It may be the person we're in conflict with, maybe our next door neighbor eventually, maybe our boss, maybe a co-worker, who knows? So I think we can, so why accent the positive aspects? Why not act out the negative, which we have a temptation to do? And so, but it's building sustainable relationships. So it's just like the Soviets, when US and Soviets, we had an antagonistic relationship, but we had a sustainable relationship. There was a hotline to the White House and the Kremlin. We could at least communicate with each other. There was, you didn't have to like each other, but there was a relationship. So we can have relationships with people, not necessarily that we like, but it can be sustainable. So I want to go here into the conflict grid. And I think this will be helpful for understanding the different ways of dealing with conflict. We're focused on one. Here's a concern for results and production. Just want to get, and as you move along on this horizontal grid, it's getting the job done, meeting all of your needs. Here's the concern for other parties. So here in down, low scores on both is avoidance and denial. Neutrality is maintained at all costs. They don't want to deal with it. And this is an emotional response too. We, as humans, the research says as humans, we need emotions to survive. So this is sort of a deer in the headlights, freeze, or flee. I'm not going to deal with this. Are there, so if you look at the grid, it kind of paints avoidance denial in a negative framework. Are there times where avoidance really makes sense? Anybody?
Violence, when violence is involved.
When what?
Violence is
When
involved.
violence is involved, you couldn't buy it. Yes, you just leave. Yes. What else? Are there certain topics you might avoid with coworkers?
Politics.
Maybe you're a Republican, I'm a socialist, whatever. You might avoid such a thing. We don't need to go there in the workplace. You like one team, I like another team. We just let it go. I was with a group of moms a while back, and one mom said, I could be in conflict with my daughter every day. She mixes stripes with plaids, the colors don't work, but she said, and I thought, smart mom, she said, we could be at it every single day, but I save my conflicts for the big stuff. So she mixes the stripes with plaids, let it go. Let's not even talk about it. You know. So there's some things that are just, although it's painted here as somewhat negative, there are times where we need to use avoidance. Or many of you, I'm sure, you sleep on it overnight. You've had this conflict. See how you feel in the morning when tempers die down. So avoidance can work that way. Let's look here. The next one. This is satisfying the other party. It's not necessarily satisfying your needs, your organization's needs. So accommodation, you give in. When might be a proper time to do that? You're right. You're right. I'm wrong. Yeah, John.
When the costs are too high.
The costs are too high, yeah.
How about just when it's right? When that's exactly right. You're right, I'm wrong.
Yeah, I've had to apologize to people. You're absolutely right. And vice versa, I've gotten an apology back. Someone called and left me a phone message. Ron, you're absolutely right, and I was wrong. I am sorry. I apologize. Well, I just felt so good that day. So there is a time to accommodate. Are there times, though, has anybody ever felt like you've accommodated to the point where you're a doormat? You've given and given and given. The other party, yeah, a lot of heads nodding. So that's the negative here. And with organizations, too, we can give and give and give to the point where we lose our sense of mission, our purpose, who we are as people. So accommodation can be overused. So you want to really think about what's important about this relationship and what's at stake here. So you may want to accommodate and give in. On the other hand, no, I need to get the job done for my organization or my team, myself. Let's move over here towards competition. Notice where it's at on the grid. So you essentially you get the job done for yourself, your organization. It's win-lose. So, for example, we might have a group of pastors in an inner city that will tell the drug lords, look, you're out of here, the churches will win, you're going to lose, you're gone. And you may say, well, why don't we compromise? Or why not accommodate them? There's so much at stake. Or there's so much at stake, look, I've got to go, we're going to go and decide this thing in the courts. It's competition. Somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. We've got to set a legal precedent here. So there are times where, yes, competition makes sense. And it's the heck with your feelings. The mission or something is so big is at stake. You don't satisfy the other parties. Heck with them kind of attitude. Do you see a negative to competition? Anybody?
Somebody's gotta lose.
Somebody's got to lose, yeah. So they can often, the losers can say things like, well, maybe you won the battle, but the war is going to continue. Just you wait. We'll be back. Back with the next lawsuit, back with the next whatever. So it doesn't satisfy the other parties. That's the negative. And you also worry about the relationship too. Do you need to be in relationship with these people or organization, whatever it is? So that, again, there are positives and negatives. We're moving towards one. Here is compromise, and people think that's what we do. I teach compromise. Notice where it's at in the middle, though. You sort of satisfy the other parties, and you sort of satisfy yourself. And but we're going to move towards what I call interest-based problem solving. That one corner of the grid where you satisfy other parties and you satisfy yourself. So compromise, again, you assume the pie is, you can just divide the pie. Everybody's got to win something, everybody's got to lose something. So Mary Follett, one of the mothers of conflict resolution, was in a library. The patrons were arguing. I want the window closed, says one. I want the window open, says the other. So these are prominent patrons. Let's just say the prominent funders of the library. What's the librarian going to do? Anybody? What's the compromise approach?
I would move one to another window, open one for one, keep one closed for the other.
You could do that, yeah. Which would be, might move outside the compromise approach towards what we call interest-based problem solving. So a compromiser would say, well, I'm going to open the window halfway. You're both going to be a little uncomfortable. That's the classic compromise approach. Now, she asked them, so she said, well, what's the problem here? I don't understand. Could you help me understand? Cliché phrase, but it works. Can you help me understand? Well, people want to help, and they're under stress. They're flipped out. So one says, I need to avoid a draft at all times. I need to have fresh air at all times. So she said, aha. We had, the old question is, should the window be open or closed? I think we have a new question. So this is called reframing. We'll go back. This is one thing I really want you to take away with this. We reframe a question to reflect interest. So, she says, so the old question, closed or shut. New question is, how can you get fresh air and how can you avoid draft at the same time? So really have had a response to this anticipating interest. Move one away from the window, move one closer to the window. What are the other options that we could use? A lot of creative responses. How can one get fresh air and avoid a draft at the same time?
Take a break.
Well, you can take a break, find another room. You put a screen in front of the window, put one on one side, one on the other side, so one gets fresh air, avoid a draft. We've brainstormed, I've done brainstorming with a lot of people, and we'll come up with 10, 12 solutions, all of which could work. So in this case, Follett went to the window, opened the transom at the top, which brought in fresh air, no draft, both parties were satisfied. So I also want to illustrate this, this again. what's the difference between compromise and what we call interest-based problem solving. So I was in a car wreck, my car was destroyed, and I did some research what it would take to replace that car. And so I went to my insurance adjuster, and he said, well, what do you want for that car? And I said, well, I need X amount of dollars to replace it. And he said, oh, no, I can't do that. I'll give you X minus $2,000. So here we have a conflict over $2,000. So this, again, trite but useful phrase, help me understand why you why you can only pay me X minus 2,000. So he said, well, it's that dang insurance commissioner from the state of Kentucky. They insist we use the American used car book. And I said, well, but in the blue book, it's worth $2,000 more. He said, well, but it's that insurance commissioner, and I just have to go with them. So I said, well, thank you very much. I'm going to call and just verify. That's okay. Oh, and then he says, look, so I make a strong argument, and then he argues back. I'm a good guy. You're a good guy. Let's compromise. I'll go up 1,000 if you go down 1,000. And I said, no, I don't think that's going to meet my needs. I need that amount to replace that car. So I go to the insurance commissioner, and he says, well, he says he has to use this American Standard used car book, whatever it is. And he said, no, he's not supposed to use that. So I said, the blue book, no, he's not supposed to use that either. I said, how does he pay the fair market value of that car? And the insurance commissioner's office said, well, what he can do is go through the newspapers for the past 6 months, look for cars that have that mileage, that make, maybe call 4 or 5 auto dealers and what it would take to replace something like that. So I called the insurance adjuster back again, and I make my point and tell him what I heard. And he said, well, look, I'm a good guy. It's a lot of work to do all that research. I'm a good guy. You're a good guy. Let's compromise. I'll go up 1,000, you go down 1,000. No, I said, that's not going to meet my needs. I said, help me understand why you can't pay me X, because this is what they said. He said, well, that's a lot of work. Go through newspapers for the past 6 months, call 4 or 5 auto dealers. And I said, look, I'm a researcher. I've done that. And he said, wow, you've done that? Yeah, it's easy. So he says, well, I don't care what I do. All I need is some kind of written documentation to back up whatever check I write. So here we had a conflict framed. Are you going to get X or X minus 2,000? The new framing is, how can you get the replacement value for that car, and how can the insurance adjuster get his informational needs to actually write a check? So we have a new question. So I send him the information, and I get a check the next day, X, what I wanted, minus $25. Well, it was so close. For $25, I'll accommodate. Let's get this thing moving. So this is how it works. Now, let's pretend we're going to, I want to get to interest. So does anybody have some kind of organizational tension that's sort of public? Are you merging groups or eliminating a group? Cutting back? Anybody here? Yeah.
I'm just like a follow-up on that last scenario.
Yeah.
Just to see how you felt when you actually got finished with it. Because one of the questions that I had when you were talking about is the window. Did you open the window or did you close the window? Is the motivation of the person demanding? What's the motivation of the person who said, I want the window up, I want the window down? Because it's not always honesty. So in your particular case, the problem was the man, one, didn't tell you the truth. The second part was that he was too lazy to do the work. And that's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
You were willing to do the work and actually did the work for him, and then he cut you a check.
Yeah.
So when I look at that, I'm like, well, if I were in the opposite place, I'd be happy with my X minus $25, but I wouldn't be satisfied with the outcome when I actually had to do something for a person I've been paying a premium to do for me.
Yeah, and so it depends where your interests are. So why don't we, I need a number of people to come up. I need 2 volunteers. We'll do this with our bodies. Okay? So why don't you come on up?
Which one do I get to be? What happens to you,
I need another person. Okay. And let's just say we have a new issue, okay? You're from...
Terry.
I know Terry.
You're from, and you're...
Linda.
Linda. Very good. Terry and Linda are here. Why don't you face the group? I need you over here, actually, and kind of facing everybody. So let's say we're going, they're in 2 different departments, and UK administration is thinking we ought to consolidate these 2. They ought to be one department. Okay? Potentially. And let's say you think, wow, that Linda, that this is a great idea. You're opposed. So,
I like that.
yeah, but let's say you're opposed to this organizational issue, or your administrators, there's something's happening in the university, there's a consolidation of, let's say pharmacy at U of L and pharmacy at UK. Maybe that's even happened, I don't know. But let's say you have different perspectives. You're for, let's say you're against.
Okay.
I'm for,
Okay.
I'm against, okay? Now, let's find out why you might be for. Let's have somebody come up and stand in front of, I'm sorry.
Terry.
Terry. Who can stand in front of Terry?
I don't bite. I haven't for some time.
Craig, you can stand in front of Terry. And let's just say Terry says, well, I'm for consolidation because I think it will save us a lot of money, save the university. So stand in front of Terry. I am concerned, you might say, I'm against the proposal because I'm concerned that
Jobs are gonna be lost.
jobs will be lost. So who can stand in front of her? Okay. Let's say they're both concerned about, let's say, the quality of the services that will be offered with this consolidation. One thinks it will be strengthened, one thinks it might be weakened. So we need people to stand in front of them. So, notice where these are interest. These are positions. I want the window closed. I want it open. So we probed, and there may be other issues. You don't like Linda, or I don't know, whatever it is. So, but we have the interest in front. And if we know what the interests are, we can reframe, have a new problem. Old problem, should the window be open or closed? The new problem is, the old problem is framed, should these 2 units be consolidated or not? Bad question, very bad question. So the new question, notice what unites them both. How can we strengthen the quality of our services? And you were concerned about saving money in ways that might save money and still retain some of our jobs. May still be loud and boisterous. I'm for, I'm again. I want the window closed, I want it open. I want X, you're going to get X minus 2,000. These are positions, but what we're really trying to do, so you can sit down now, is to get to the real interest of the parties in the dispute. This is the heart of what I want you to learn. So help me understand why you're for, why you're against. What is this about? What's at stake? What's the issue? if we can deal with interest, we can have a new problem, and then we can begin our creative solutions. There isn't one, but many solutions. What could the parties live with? Then I think we're moving again towards satisfying. Notice where that's at on the grid. Interest-based problem solving satisfies the other party. It satisfies both parties, our needs too. So that's what we're trying to get at. You can use this in negotiation. I had a colleague, and she said, I went to this school and I wanted them to use this program. And she said the principal was so occupied with the low test scores at this high school that more or less, I don't have any time for this. It might be an interesting program, but I don't have time to teach the kids this. So I said, have you thought about how that program, was the entrepreneurship, how that might help test scores, how that might address her issues? No, it's just a great program. Yeah, but she's concerned. Her real interests are not for or against that program. Her real interests are how can I raise the test scores in that high school? So when you bring the interests together, what's really at stake, frame it in terms of a new problem, you're on your way. But if it's framed like window, open or close, Republican or Democrat, raise taxes, don't raise taxes, you may as well just arm people with pitchforks, venomous names, and go to it. Because you've set, that's the scenario, either or. So here, let's say the two organizations were thinking about merging, but the real question is how can we strengthen the quality of services in ways that save money and might maintain our jobs. So there may be lots of ways out, lots of options. Same with school consolidation. So some of our rural schools, I think KET is involved with this. At least a number of years ago I saw this. So you might think, well, why have a small school? You can't offer advanced German, advanced calculus. Well, you can do that in a rural school. You can have a teacher kind of do some long-distance education and teach that way. So a small school of just a few students can have advanced German, advanced algebra, whatever. So there are ways out, a lot of options. So that's what I want you to think about, is help me understand what's really at stake here. I'm reminded of the old Rolling Stones song, you can't always get what you want. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you get what you really need. So what I want is just a predetermined solution. That's all that is. A predetermined solution. Let's see. So it's just one way to settle a conflict or a difference. Are we going to close this outfit or are we going to merge? What are we going to do? Something like that. Bad question. So how can we meet your interest and your interest at the same time? So the key is getting to interest. And again, we can get stuck. We don't understand the real interest of the parties in the dispute. I'm for, I'm against. It does. We're not getting anywhere. So help me understand would be another key phrase. So interest are what's underneath the positions, the needs, the beliefs, the values. Well, I'm afraid. I am, whatever it is, I would be saddened if this happened. It really tells you why something is important. So, for example, one of the most contentious cases I had was in a public school. And the school had something called the hanging of the green. greens. It was at Christmas time. They put up greens and sang Christmas carols. The school's makeup changed over the years, so there were a number of Jewish people, non-believers, atheists, these were all parents. There were some Muslims, Jehovah's Witnesses, people of various persuasions. And so the principal said, well, you know, our school is so diversified, I'm canceling the hanging of the greens, this 50-year-old tradition, and we're just going to have music about friendship and love, because isn't that what Christmas is all about? And we won't mention the word Christmas, no greens, nothing like that. And she said, we will never sing Silent Night in this school again. So the students were okay, the parents went crazy. And so they framed it, are we going to let the dang Jews and atheists push us around? Are we going to let the dang Christians push us around? So who's going to win? Really bad framing. It's like the window should be open or closed. We didn't know the real interest of the parties in the dispute. So the other thing here is, so you have all my handouts, and I'll tell you where to get more information. But essentially, when people are in disputes, they're flipped out, they're stressed out, again, the emotions come. So they're sad, they're angry, they're afraid, all kinds of things. And these are natural emotions. It's okay, those emotions need to be acknowledged in some way. So do say, so if I hear you, you're really upset about this, you're angry, you're afraid, you're uncertain, whatever it is, at least recognize the emotions. Then help me understand what's really at stake here. What's the real issue? Why are you opposed? Why are you for? And so with that school issue, so bad framing in the beginning. Are you going to respect Christian ideals or go against them? That's kind of part of how it was framed. So as we probed with the parents, we recognize all the emotions. That takes about 20 minutes. Then people are somewhat calmed down. Okay, what's at stake here? And then we can get to the real interest. So it's just like you saw these people in front of you. There's still these people, I'm for, I'm against, they're mad, they're upset. But if you get the real interest forward, it's easier to deal with that. And you still might have these other people in the back. But this is so much easier to deal with, are the real interest. So what were the real interests of the parties in the dispute? They were quite mixed, and it wasn't an either or. So for example, we had devout Christians that said, I think it's time we got rid of the hanging of the greens, Christmas carols in schools, because I believe in total separation of church and state, and the state will just mess up the celebration of Christmas. They don't need to be involved. Others said, no, we also had, I remember practicing Jews said, I kind of like it. I like the hanging of the greens and the Christmas carols. It's like walking into a beautiful cathedral. Not that it's mine, but I like the sentiment and feel. It's really nice. I think we ought to continue. So you get these nuances. What are your real interests? What's at stake here? Finally, the group, it took 6 months. What do you really want? We want our children to be exposed to the diversity of religious beliefs in this community. Is that what you really want? Yeah. And I remember a Muslim woman turning to a Christian and said, okay, and how would this work? And she said, you know, I could go with that, education. So my kid might sing Silent Night. Now, if the next song is a Muslim song, would your Baptist child sing that Muslim song, the next one? Yeah, he said, I'd do that. That would be educational. So it moved towards a common ground. So what you want to find is that common ground, whatever unites us, what our real interests are. And the real interests were what's best for the kids. How is that going to work? So I think this is the real heart of interest-based problem solving. So there are two things you really need to know. What are interests? You're going to get to the very heart of something, the needs, the beliefs, the values under somebody's argument. And then, well, all parties. So it may not just be two sides. Actually, with this Christmas concert thing, there were 6, 7 sides. So if we have these interests, how could we, what's the problem then? What's the real issue here? We may have to break it down into 2 or 3 problems. But what's the problem? And then, let's brainstorm. What's possible? What could work? Well, there might be 100 things that could work. Well, let's identify 3 priorities, 3 things you think would really, might be feasible. So, again, we want to get to interest. So again, when you get to, it gets people unstuck, and then you have mutual understanding, and you can generate a lot of creative options. That's, and then a new frame. Remember, the bad frames are us versus them, either or, bad framing. Reframing is all about interest. How can you get what you really need and what you really need at the same time? That's the new question. So we have people that get stuck in the old ways of framing. The brightest, the best in our midst, they get stuck with positions. And they don't know how to reframe. So as leaders, what you can do is say, I think your interests are, how can you avoid a draft? How can you get fresh air? Whatever it is, how can you get X for your car and still meet your informational needs? So that's where the common ground is. That's where the common ground is. So that's the real heart of it. What time do we have? And we're going till 2:30 or something.
Yes.
2:30. I want to stop here and just see if you have questions, comments about how this might work, or challenges. Maybe you don't get it. Normally, I do this workshop over 2 days, so we only have a very brief time. But I wanted to get to the very heart of this. Yes, sir.
Sort of a comment. Sometimes I think it's difficult to get to interest because of the sides you create and the anger
Yep.
that gets created. How do you recommend people to get sort of to those interests first to avoid that anger?
That's a great question. First of all, recognize the anger. They're upset about something. I see people are upset. You're upset? Are you upset? Are you upset? You know, that's fine. You can also create a climate for a common ground. So, for example, I was involved in Eastern Kentucky, and we brought coal firm owners with hardcore environmentalists. They hated and despised each other's guts. So Hazel King, this environmentalist, maybe in her late 70s, laid down in front of a bulldozer and said, "You're mining this property over my dead body." Well, one of the mining owners said, you know, if Hazel dropped dead from a heart attack, it wouldn't bother me one way or the other. So, now Hazel was, didn't have those feelings, but some of the environmentalists said, you know, Ron, these coal firm guys, they're just like Nazis. In fact, they're worse than Nazis. I said, really? Yes, trust me. Trust me. They're just totally evil. We brought them, they agreed to come together. We were going to look at post-mining land restoration. And so in our preliminary work, it seemed like there was some common ground. Mining firms have to restore the land back to its original contour, ideally after they mine it. So, and there were problems with the land slipping, even in trying to do this. Some people wanted flat land for development. There are a lot of issues. So we brought them together. These people hated each other's guts, didn't trust each other. So you speak to their common values. So Hazel King, this environmentalist, lit a candle and said, I'm lighting this candle as a sign of my willingness to engage in a very difficult dialogue. It's painful for me. The mining firm owners said, I'm doing the same thing. Together they took their candle and lit one candle and blew theirs out. So at least we're united for the dialogue. That's all we've agreed to. We're going to talk. So again, powerful symbol from the region's marriage ceremonies. Then there was a choir that, because we knew this was going to get wild, actually I had one of my administrators from my college came and said, Ron, you don't know what you're doing. This is going to get totally out of hand, and I'm here to clean up the mess. So, but I have enough knowledge about this area and how we can work. So they both lit the candles. Then there was a teenage choir that sang America the Beautiful. People are very patriotic in the region. And it's a beautiful song, and people like teenagers for the most part. Then there were silent observers around the room. Well, who are you? I'm the pastor of the local Catholic church. I'm the elder of the Presbyterian church, etc. So these were all faith-based leaders. So yeah, people were ready to act out. You know good, crummy, da-da-da, whatever. But it's pretty clear. You're not going to act out with all these religious leaders more or less surrounding the room, silent observers. So, and then at the same time, there was a brisket cooking in the back of the room, apple pie out for lunch. So, appealing to the senses. Yes, I'm flipped out, I'm angry, I'm upset. But how can we minimize that? Create a framework that'll be a little less flipped out. So whatever it takes. Now, when I came back to my department, at the time, one of my faculty members said, well, lighting a candle and singing America the Beautiful, how hokey can you get? And I said, well, maybe hokey for this department, but in that region, that was something that really worked. So whatever it takes to bring out the best in people, so you need a framework or a setting that will tend to bring out the best, whatever that thing is. And so again, we can probe ahead of time with interest what would work. Sometimes, if nothing is solved, that's the other threat too, is, look, if the parties can't agree, we had this actually in my department, the dean will make a decision. Could be either way. So that sort of forced us, I think we better work together. We don't want to live with that. We'll create our own thing, whatever that issue was. So the outside threats the lawsuit, whatever, that could be big. Am I answering your question? So disarm people, they're ready, they got the guns out. And I've also had to do this in some places. You will pass through a metal detector. We will check guns. You know, and I've had a 70-year-old woman that she had a little, in her tiny purse, she had a gun. We had to leave it at the door. So, disarming people. And then with words, so that could be ground rules too. With those faith-based leaders at the coal firm environmentalist summit. I mean, that kind of, these are pretty much religious people, so they kind of knew how they were going to behave. It was going to be really hard to get up and tell people, spout off, you know, and tell people how wicked they are, each side. So, whatever it takes. Remember, people, it's natural for us, the research says it's natural for us to be emotional. We need emotions to survive. We should be afraid. We should be sad. We should be angry. We need that. But how are we going to bring out the best when we're faced with that? So that's the issue.
Yes, actually, there is a wisdom in anger.
Yes.
Unless a person is psychotic, usually people get angry when they're insulted, they're belittled, they're ignored, they're being cheated on. So there's a wisdom into anger, but most of the time we make a mistake between anger and the reaction we have to the anger. Like somebody gets angry and breaks a plate, and somebody gets angry and leaves the room, and so that's the reaction we have to the anger. Otherwise, it's everybody's right to be angry if they want to.
Yeah, and people should be angry. I think that's appropriate. Yeah, you're right. There's wisdom in it. So it's channeling that and finding out what's really at stake here. You can't always get what you want, but the interests are the old Rolling Stone song. You get what you really need. Get what you really need. Yes, sir.
So do these types of things have a trajectory? Sometimes with the passage of time, things get better. And sometimes with the passage of time, things get worse.
That's the problem with avoidance.
So what would have been great was for something to have happened before Hazel had to lay down in front of lay down, whichever it is, down in front of the bull does. Until you get to the point where you have a flashpoint. And at the flashpoint, that's like the worst possible moment to try to calm everything, or maybe it isn't.
I mean, Hazel, again, she was using getting back to our grid here, she was using the competition approach. Our side will win. You can mine my dead body, but that's going to be, I mean, bulldoze my dead body, that's going to be really bad publicity for you, and you're not going to get anywhere. She knew that. So, again, you can mix and match a lot of these. And there are certainly times where you want to go to the courts, or you want the boss to decide, or the president of the university to decide. Again, no, but if you do that, notice where it's at on the grid. You don't satisfy the other party, and they'll be back to get you. You accommodate and give in. Hazel, you're right, we won't mine this property. Well, mining firm's not going to succeed. So, and again, I don't want to say all of these approaches are, well, they're all useful. What is least used is interest-based problem solving. Because we get stuck in our positions and we think the only way out is to compromise. That's a serious problem. So if you can reframe it in terms of interest, then we can get a lot of creative options. There isn't one solution. So the other trap, I did something like this with my graduate students, and what they come up with the one solution. aha, I know what we need to do. That's, in the world of conflict, it's called the Solomon trap. King Solomon, wise guy from the Bible. So what happens then is the disputants say, that's really the stupidest idea I ever heard of. And will often get angry, fuel their anger. So with the disputants, if we're kind of in the middle, we don't have a stake, then we might explore, our job is to help explore options. Okay, the new problem is, how can we have the window open? Or how can we avoid a draft and get fresh air? Well, again, we can come up with 10, 20, 100 options. Well, what would work best? So you don't want to, the technocrats say, I got the solution. Yeah, but there's social consequences, there's, all kinds of things. So help the disputants. As leaders, I think you can help the disputants figure it out. You create this climate for problem solving, interest-based problem solving. So let's say we go to health. I have to have chocolate and dessert every day. So Weight Watchers might say, you don't necessarily need to have a 500-calorie brownie with whatever on top. You can get your chocolate fix or your sweet fix in another way. So you get your interests met. But I want that 500-calorie chocolate brownie. They reframe it, what you really want is a great sweet. And here's some options for you. So it's the reframe, and if we can agree to the reframing, that's the other thing. So how can you, so I think the new question might be, how can you get that rich sweet and still lose weight at the same time? That's the new, I guess I would say it's the new reframing. Challenges. If you don't challenge me, I'll really be upset. Questions? Yeah, John.
I don't know how many of my colleagues in here were here yesterday at the same time, and Dr. Wayne Lewis was talking about leadership in the face of creating more inclusive and diverse university. I was curious if in the times we're in now where we seek leadership, or we ourselves may have to lead to help contribute to a more inclusive and diverse university campus. How might some of the techniques you're discussing, or have you had experiences in trying to lead people through that?
Yeah, I think the other question we asked, who needs to be at the table? And often that is diversity. So we can have is false agreement. I just want my buddies here. And I mean, we're the key decision makers, and why do we need these people over here? Somebody could ask that question. Well, you need that table because they always oppose this issue, and they'll make havoc, or they have great ideas. So if we want ownership of the problem, then yeah, we need people with different perspectives: men, women, Democrats, Republicans, minorities, etc. Men, women, it goes on and on. But the question I always ask is, what's at stake here, and who really needs to be at the table? So whatever we decide can help us move the decision forward, or could stop it. Who needs to be here? So often the table is too small. So, you know about Paris Pike? Paris Pike, was a really dangerous road. And so the Department of Transportation, the idea is, I think the original was, let's just bulldoze all these farms, and, go straight through. And so the question was, how can we preserve the historic character of Paris Pike and all these horse fences and horse farms and beautiful trees, and still have a safe highway? So that took 3 years. It does take time, but the stakeholders were involved. So the people with safety, historic preservationists, the farm owners, managers. They were all involved in deciding how to maintain Paris Pike, but still have a safe highway. So I don't know if I'm getting to your point.
Thank you.
Is that helpful? You're going to challenge me? No?
So, if you are sort of that neutral party or leading a group where there's conflict, how do you pull in the accommodators and the avoiding folks so that you're actually getting the full spectrum of interests?
Well, again, I think the accommodators or avoiders, well, whatever, if they want to blow up the university, whatever, I don't care, or close it down, I guess it's their business. So, but I think largely people do have a stake, and your presence here is really important. Give them a role. It can be small. Could you bring the apple pie? Could you do this or that? Yeah, and people will accommodate. Well, the accommodators will accommodate that. Okay, I'll bring the apple pie. Oh, and we need your input. So whatever it takes to bring those key stakeholders to the table, and then use their time efficiently. I think that's another efficient meetings, efficient creative meetings, or that's a whole nother topic. But, what can we do in an hour, 2 hours that you're really going to like? I got a great agenda. It'll get to interest, it'll get to problem solving, it'll address emotions. So yeah, and also with the avoiders, look, if we don't do something by February, the dean or the president will make a decision or will go to the courts. What do you think? We can do it ourselves, we can let somebody else decide. Typically, even the avoider will say, I don't trust, or I don't know what we're going to get out of that. Let's us work on it. If it's something really important, if it's trivial, then maybe they're not really a key stakeholder. If they have no feeling, I would say. Oh my, we're almost out of time. So you've gotten a 2-day workshop in a very short period of time.
So you didn't answer my question, how you felt when you got finished with your insurance person.
Oh, well, when I finished with the insurance, I was satisfied because I already done research.
Right.
So if I hadn't done the research, I probably would have done it anyway. For me, it was so important for me to get X amount of dollars for that car that I could have done it fairly quickly and have furnished him with the information. Or I could have used the competitive. You mean you're not going to do the research? I'm going to call the Kentucky Insurance Commission.
Right.
And that might have produced results too. So I chose to go interest-based. So you could have done that. Yeah, could have done a competition. I'll take it to court, but I don't know. But I didn't use that for that. I didn't need to. So you can mix and match a lot of this. So I have a colleague, a dear colleague, and it's kind of humorous, but I said, I really need I need to do this workshop on a weekend, and could you give up your weekend? She said, really, I had great things planned, but for you, I will do it. I will do it. I'll give up my entire weekend. So she accommodated. The relationship is so important. But she says, I'll tell you what, Hustedde, you owe me and you owe me big, and I will collect. So another weekend comes along that's precious to me. So we can mix and match these approaches. They're all valuable. Avoidance is, I think, the one that is really mixed, that can we really avoid certain things? Climate change and stuff like that. There's a lot at stake here. So, and a lot of times things get worse. Oh, it'll go away. I've had administrators, oh, it's not a big problem. It'll just go away in a few weeks, in a month, in a year. Well, it gets bigger and the flames get bigger and it gets out of hand. So, so what are the two things you should have learned today? What's the first one?
Reframe the questions.
Reframing, yes. You have to reframe the problem based on interest. If you can find the interest, then there's hope. And we can come up with a lot of creative options. A lot. Gazillion. And then we prioritize. And then I guess the other is emotions are out there. Let's try to bring out the very best in people when they're flipped out. Food, fear, I don't know what it is. Music, candles, we use that. So I use food a lot. I had a group of elected leaders that were really flipped out. And so we brought them to a neutral space and there was a ton of food and it was being cooked and the odors were just, it mellowed people out. They felt like they were around somebody's kitchen table. Grandma was cooking, that kind of thing. So again, whatever it takes. Well, John, I guess we're done. Also, if you look at the very back, I have written a 200-page training manual. Normally, I put you in conflict after conflict after conflict, my 2-day training. So you can look at the training manual. It's free, it can be downloaded, and the website is there. So I'm pleased to come back and offer more time if you want to really dig. And so it becomes visceral. This is in my gut. It's not just in my head. So, and how do you get there in your gut? Remember the old adage, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. So practice